people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Tensions have heightened between Russia and Ukraine, with Russian state media alleging that a blast in the country's Tula region was caused by a Ukrainian drone packed with explosives. 3 people were reportedly injured when they were struck by shrapnel. However, Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for this alleged attack. It follows pleas from the European Union for Russia to halt the stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus. Kyiv's foreign ministry has called the decision provocative and is calling for a session of the UN Security Council. Well, England has beaten Ukraine 2-0 in their Group C Euro qualifiers match. Both teams joined for a photograph before the game as players clutched a Ukrainian flag with peace written across it. The FA had given 1,003 tickets to Ukrainian refugees and their British hosts to attend the game. First-half goals from Harry Kane and Bukayo Saka were enough to seal the win. They'll face off again in September. Well, offenders who commit antisocial behaviour will be forced to clean up their communities as part of the Prime Minister's new immediate justice scheme. Under the plans to be announced tomorrow, local authorities will be given new powers to quickly and visibly punish criminals. Those who spray graffiti or commit other vandalism will have to fix the damage within 48 hours. Other penalties include picking up litter, washing police cars or doing unpaid work in shops. Well, as part of the crackdown, the government has also announced a ban on the sale of laughing gas, levelling up Secretary Michael Gove, telling broadcasters that nitrous oxide canisters are helping to fuel antisocial behaviour and turning public spaces into drug-taking arenas. Well, in international news, the US president has declared a state of emergency in Mississippi after a tornado killed at least 26 people. The twister swept through the state and on into Alabama, cutting a path of destruction 170 miles long. Around 11,000 residents there are still without power, They say there was no safe place to hide. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says they need to be more prepared for disastrous weather.
We see extreme weather events increasing, only increasing in gravity, in severity, and in frequency. And we have to build our communities to be best prepared for them, to prevent the devastation to the extent possible, to be able to quickly respond and recover, to prove ourselves resilient.
We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Time now for Free Speech Nation.
Protesters at the Let Women Speak event in New Zealand turn violent. A comedian is hounded on social media for offensive jokes told many years ago. And barristers say they won't prosecute climate activists, even if they break the law. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and, of course, we're going to keep you updated on the latest antics of our good friends, the Culture Warriors. And as usual, they've kindly ensured we are very well stocked with material. Coming up on the show tonight, we'll be discussing the decision made by over 100 legal professionals not to involve themselves in prosecuting climate activists. Baroness Claire Fox will be here to tell us why she was uninvited from a university debating society because she liked a Ricky Gervais joke. We're going to be talking to the protesters. We'll be talking about the protesters who turned violent at an event in New Zealand organised by women's rights campaigner Kelly J. Keane. And myself and my wonderful panel will be answering questions from our beautiful studio audience. All that and much more tonight on Free Speech Nation. And my studio guests this evening are the comedians Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse. Welcome both. Thanks for coming. You've been making fudge this week, Diane.
I love making fudge, and it's Easter, so I'm putting all the little mini eggs, the little treats in it. Have you tried making those like Rice Krispie nests with the mini eggs in it?
I don't do anything like this.
What?
But I haven't turned my mattress in 10 years. I'm not domesticated.
Oh no!
Leo, what about you? Fudge fan?
I like packing fudge.
Interesting. Right, let's move on swiftly. It's a bit early in the show for that, Leo. We're going to get some questions from the audience. Our first question is from Julie. Where's Julie? Hi, Julie. Hello.
Hi. Is the party over for Boris Johnson?
Yeah, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Of course, he's scrapping for his political life. This is the fallout from Partygate. It continues to go. He was grilled on Wednesday by a committee of Conservative and opposition MPs. And this is all about those gatherings that took place in Downing Street. I thought we'd all forgotten about that, Leo, but apparently not.
Yeah, this feels like, you know how they're going after Donald Trump in America with anything, any minor parking violation. It's like, no, Boris, there's still... I mean, number one, he's already gone. He's not Prime Minister anymore. I don't know if anybody's told these people who are still persecuting him, but, he's not...
Yeah, but he did annoy a lot of people by having these parties in Downing Street when everyone else had to observe the rules that he set, right?
He was working... He only had to set those rules because the British public are a bunch of crybabies who need the government to wipe their bum for them. So they needed to be locked down to feel safe.
Oh, you're such an authoritarian, Leo, honestly.
He didn't want to set those rules. And it's ridiculous that, somebody who went into work and had to be in the office, for real, instead of doing it over Zoom or sitting at home on furlough, then, gets in trouble for suddenly, having a cake or having a small pina colada while they're at work.
They shouldn't be having cake, should they?
No, they should not, and I disagree with everything you just said. Boris Johnson is a lying liar who lies, and he should be dragged through the streets, and he should be pelted with photos of people having to say goodbye to their loved ones through glass while he's drinking pop.
We're going to have a lot of extreme reactions tonight from this panel, I think.
Anybody who followed the COVID rules is the sort of person who ejects a USB drive before pulling out the side of their computer. They're the sort of person who pays for carrier bags at the checkout. You know what I mean?
You have to eject a USB, otherwise you will corrupt the disk.
I've been doing it for like 40 years. I've never corrupted a file yet. Honestly,
we're getting off topic here a little bit, but what I would say is at least Boris Johnson's made an effort this week. He's combed his hair. He looks really quite sharp. He doesn't normally bother. So he's taking it seriously.
It is pathetic pathetic. He is there and he is rewriting history in his own mind, saying, oh, well, if I did lie, whoops, no, this is ridiculous.
OK, well, we're not going to resolve this if the committee can't. OK, let's move on to another question. This one's from Helen. Helen, hi, Helen.
Hello. Are Michelangelo's statues, specifically I'm thinking of the statue of David in Florence, are they pornographic?
Pornographic. So I couldn't believe this story. I read this week. So there's a principal at the Florida school has had to resign because a parent claimed that the 6th grade students who were being... Well, they claimed they were being shown pornographic images, but the image they were being shown was Michelangelo's statue of David, and it was shown during a Renaissance art lesson. Diane, this is not pornography. It's one of the most important works of art ever produced.
It's an absolutely incredible work of art, and I'm very surprised that they say that this is pornographic. I get it, he's naked, but surely part of the artwork is the context, is the fact that David beat Goliath, and we see him naked and vulnerable, and yet he took down a giant.
He took down a giant while he was naked. What? I mean, that would add a level of, a level of embarrassment and difficulty to the battle.
Also, I mean, I guess it brings up that whole argument of what is art, what is pornography, because you watch, like, a Nicki Minaj pop video, and I'm sorry, that's pornography in my book. But
are you thinking of Anaconda?
I am.
Yeah,
oh
I thought you might be, yeah.
See, you are gay. So...
Never denied it, Diane.
No, well, it's for all the people on Twitter who go, no, he's not. Yes, he is.
I also quite like Michelangelo, so he was gay as well. Leo, I mean, do you think... Look, I would say, can we show a picture of Michelangelo's David, but I think we all know what it looks like,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it definitely doesn't look like porn. No. I don't know if anybody's seen porn, but Michelangelo David is much too small and isn't going...
It's actually quite... No, it's a very big statue. It's much bigger than...
the part that you could be offended about.
I knew what you're talking about.
And it's not going in and out of an orifice very quickly. So it's definitely not porn.
Yes.
But what's interesting about this is it's a Simpsons plotline. So the Simpsons seems to be predicting everything.
Is that right?
Yeah,
yeah. So they suggested... Wait a minute. By the way, is this coming from the right? Or the left? It's coming from the Republicans, isn't it?
Although, so it's in Florida where Ron DeSantis is, clamped down on sexualised teaching in schools.
Yes.
And to be fair to this decision, it's more about the sort of just the administration. So they're supposed to send out a letter that says we're going to be showing your child this statue. By the way, it's got a small marble penis. So they didn't send out that letter.
They don't need to. It's a work of Renaissance art. You don't need to explain away a naked body part.
They do because in Florida they've got these rules, and every year they send out the letter, and it's always fine.
But this is my problem with it. I think this is happening about the left and the right, OK? Because I get that some people on the right are upset by sexually graphic material which is getting into schools, which it is. And I get that you want to clamp down on that, but then they go too far and say we've got to ban anything and statues, important works of art like this. This is coming from the right. So we say that the left are being very censorial at the moment. I think the right are doing it too.
They are doing it as well, and it's a bit of a Wild West education, because at the moment, sort of the culture war has pushed its way into education and into schools, both here and across the pond, probably worldwide, to be honest with you. And so people are still sort of like finding what is acceptable. But you're right, at what point does it stop being art and start being pornography?
Well, I think the point when it's exploitative, when it's, I think we all instinctively know...
It's the point where you have to open an anonymous browsing tab.
I mean, let's face it, Michelangelo's David is not titillating.
No, it's
And it
not.
wasn't designed to be titillating. I think that is the obvious difference, isn't it? But, maybe it's just me. I'm not an art critic. Anyway, we're going to move on. Actually, having said that, Camille Paglia, the commentator Camille Paglia, did claim that Michelangelo was a pornographer. She actually did make that argument, so who knows. Anyway, our next question is from Catherine. Hey, Catherine.
Hi, Andrew. Should comedians be deplatformed for using abhorrent language?
Yeah, so this is interesting. Alfie Brown, who's a comic on the circuit, very established comic, very, very funny. He's apologised because an old clip, I think it's like 7 or 8 years old, where he's doing a set in a comedy club and he repeats the N-word on numerous occasions, and that's been sort of pulled out because he got into some spat on Twitter over Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism, and then those who were supporting Jeremy Corbyn basically went through everything that he'd ever said or done and found this clip. Now, the thing about this, Leo, is obviously the word is an offensive term. No one's going to deny that. But in the context of a stand-up routine, he's doing something a bit more interesting. He's not being racist, is he? Let's be absolutely clear.
Well, yeah, him, Stuart Lee, Louis C.K., they've all used the N-word on stage. Lenny Bruce as well. They've used this word to make some, political point that obviously isn't intended to be racist. But I think he's wrong to use this word because it doesn't belong to him. It belongs to the most marginalised, oppressed community in the world today, which is racists. And
Thanks, Leo.
to culturally appropriate that word from real racists, when he wasn't even doing a racist joke, that's very offensive.
For goodness sake. Diane?
I think that when you write a stand-up routine, you have to make artistic choices.
Yeah.
We all make choices. And what is interesting here is Alfie made the choice to use that word in full. He then argued over why he should have used that word when he was confronted by a couple of people on a podcast like a few years later.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So the original clip was 2015, and I believe 3 years later, a podcast, two women sort of said to him, one of them said, I find it offensive. As a black woman, I find it offensive. And the other woman said, well, I can kind of see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But did you really need to use that word in full?
But the problem is, isn't it the case that in stand-up, often comedians, and certainly a specific type of comedian, will want to push the boundaries and maybe tease the limits of our respectability and sensitivity, and sometimes comedians will misjudge. But shouldn't we have that freedom to get it wrong? Because the context is a stand-up comedy routine. It's not literal. No comedian is literally just expressing their opinions on stage.
No, and the ones that are, you can tell that they need to seek therapy.
Yeah.
So the question was, should they be deplatformed for using abhorrent language? I would say, actually, no, because there's enough people in a comedy club who will make an instant judgment for you and let you know how your joke is coming
this is
across.
It, Leo. I mean, you've got away with murder on stage. Why aren't you getting dragged through the mud? It's not fair.
I don't know. Well, I have been dragged through the mud. I've been cancelled from festivals.
Oh, you have actually,
my tour's been cancelled this year, so...
All right, I take that back. Okay, fair enough. But you are asking for it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is when I say stuff, because I don't sound as well-read and posh as Alfie, people assume that I am actually a racist. But yeah, I mean, comedy should be a sacred space. I understand we need safe spaces for the total snowflakes who can't deal with the real world. But we also need unsafe spaces, and comedy's got to be the sacred space where you're free to transgress and cross the line, because that's how we find out what's funny.
And like Diane says, the audience will let you know pretty quickly if something isn't funny. If you just went on stage and just said racist things, people aren't going to laugh at that.
Yeah.
Because racism isn't funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it does seem very odd that they're going after a comedian. I often get confused by this literal-mindedness. Why can't people understand that a joke is not literal? Yeah. No, like the chicken. There was no chicken who crossed a road.
Yeah.
That road doesn't exist. You don't have to worry about whether it was free range or not, whether it was abused. It's not a real chicken.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people don't seem to understand that comedians we're trying to make some sort of point. We're taking a thread of logic and stretching it and twisting it until we can see if it breaks or not. Sometimes comedians are joking.
Yeah. And on that note, let's move on to another question. Very good point, Leo. We hadn't thought of that. Next question is from Jackie. Where's Jackie?
I'm here.
Hi, Jackie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is it time wolf whistling was made illegal?
I was so interested to read about this. Suella Braverman she's planning this new street harassment law, which would lead to men basically being prosecuted if they wolf whistle or make sort of sexual remarks to women. And this has actually been rumbling on for quite a long time. There's been all sorts of debates. I've heard arguments from some feminists who say this is well overdue, that wolf whistling is a form of harassment. I've heard other feminists say this is patronising. This is effectively saying that women can't handle awkward social situations themselves. Diane, you are the woman.
Yes, I believe that's why I'm here.
So you are representing the woman community.
Oh God, that is no, I can't. No, I'm not going to get involved. No.
So what's your view as an individual person?
As an individual person, my view is I noticed personally that there was a time. There is an intention. Now, what I found interesting about this is Suella Braverman has said there needs to be a reasonableness test.
To the wolf whistle?
To the wolf whistle. So if you get prosecuted for wolf whistling, they're going to perform a reasonableness... That's how she wrote it. A reasonableness test, and you need to determine whether it was a reasonable way to communicate to somebody that they look attractive today.
How do you prove that?
Well, you need to find reasonable people. I don't know where they are.
But, so, Diane, if someone came up to you and said, I find you really attractive, I mean, there are some women who would say that's a form of harassment.
Yes. Now, what is... and this is the issue, because some people don't know where the line is, because there's always, you know, the people who push it too far.
Sure.
But equally, you could take it from the extreme. Why are you commenting on somebody else's appearance
A stranger,
when you possibly don't even know them?
Right.
Why not just leave that person to go about their day? Why not appreciate them silently? But then again, I have complimented other women. I've said, oh my God, your earrings are fabulous. Like the lady who asked the question, she's got incredible trainers on. I absolutely love them. But I don't mean to harass her.
But isn't that context different? Because when it comes from a male stranger, there's always that threat of something else going on.
Yes,
you know.
Because also I have been sexually harassed on the tube. I've literally had a man sort of come up to me and rub himself against me.
Which is very different from a wolf whistle.
It was immensely different from a wolf whistle, yeah. And I thought the problem is... What?
If it made a whistling noise, then...
I mean, that would have been...
Then it could be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Or maybe a squeak, like a... but the problem...
It's all very unpleasant, though, isn't it? You know,
it is unpleasant, and it's good that there is framework so that if it is harassment, then it can be stopped. But because if you do pay people a compliment and it's well received, then the framework won't be used.
What about the view that some feminists take that this is patronising, that actually your women can handle themselves?
Yeah, but, I mean, maybe that's a little unfair to the people who are a bit more vulnerable. It's one thing saying, if you're a very strong and confident person, saying, yeah, but you should just get over it and deal with it. Yeah, but not everybody feels like that all the time. Can we not have a framework just in case somebody is being harassed and they can apply the wolf whistle? Because sometimes, also, when you hit a certain age, like, you get told you look nice and then suddenly you don't get told anymore. And now when somebody comes up to me and says, hello, darling, or something like that. I mean, they don't. It's mainly my husband when I'm trying to cook. But if somebody says that, I'm now like, thank you, anybody else? You know.
OK. Leo, this is interesting, isn't it? Because it's a very difficult one, as Diane says, it's a very difficult one to kind of judge. I mean, I had a friend who... She thought someone was wolf whistling her, and she turned around and, you know, tore a strip off him. He was just whistling a song. He was just having a nice jolly day. That's not very nice, is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty of having legislation for what is a sort of quite complex and nuanced social situation. But I've got to agree with Diane. I mean, we've got a huge problem, particularly in the UK, with sort of sexual harassment and male aggression and intimidation of women. I mean, I probably should stop, but you know, we've got this problem, so we need to do something about it. And if it can't be done,
problem, is it?
No, it's not. It's not a British problem. But like people from Canada who come to the UK are like, what on earth is going on here?
They should go to Italy.
Yeah, and then of course, I mean, there are some places where it's worse. Yeah. But you know, we don't. You know, the Taliban, Iran. You know, they might have a bit worse
women's
attitudes
rights,
to. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we can say, well, we're better than the Taliban. It's okay.
Well, I think we are better than the Taliban. But anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, over 100 legal professionals have announced they will not prosecute activists from eco groups. So barrister Sarah Phillimore will be here to discuss this. That is coming up next. Please don't go away.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Around 120 of Britain's top legal professionals have signed a declaration of conscience stating they will not prosecute eco-protesters brought before the courts. The lawyers have also said they will not act on behalf of clients involved in oil and gas production. Critics say they are ignoring the cab rank principle, whereby lawyers must take on any case that they are available for. So joining me now to discuss this is family law barrister Sarah Phillimore. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you.
So why shouldn't barristers pick and choose which jobs they take?
Because it's a fundamental cornerstone of our ethical obligations that we don't discriminate against people on the basis that we don't like them, we think they're a bit unpleasant, or we don't agree with the cause. Because we don't deny legal representation to people. You can see just immediately how dangerous that would be. Somebody who's not popular, somebody who's accused of doing a horrible thing, can't find anyone to represent them.
Because everyone is entitled to their day in court and their defence. What specifically, what kind of breach is this for a barrister to say no? There's a code of conduct, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a code of conduct. I think this involves conduct rules 28, 29 and 30. Rule 28 says you can't discriminate against somebody because you, or other people, interestingly, find them repulsive. Rule 29 is the cab rank rule. If you have got the right competence, if you've got available time, and if you're being paid enough money, you must take on a case. Now, I do quite agree, bizarrely, with Mr. Morton when he says that the cab rank rule isn't really the issue here, because, of course, the rich fossil fuel companies are going to be able to find representation of their choice. That's about having the financial freedom. But where it is hugely important is for lawyers like me, who are legally aided. I do family work. The criminal bar, I think, have rightly been very angered by this, because it's not merely saying barristers can pick and choose who they represent. It's saying barristers are then identified with who they represent.
Right.
And we can't possibly represent these people. They're so awful.
So let's clarify that. You mentioned Morm. You mentioned Jolyon Morm. Jolyon Morm is one of the major signatories of this declaration. We actually do have a statement from Jolyon Morm. This was what he said. He said the cab rank rule is bound up inseparably with the idea that the law is right and its ends are worth upholding, but the law is not always right. Sometimes the law is ugly. Sometimes it is wrong. We should not be forced to work for the law's wrongful ends by helping deliver new fossil fuel projects. We should not be forced to prosecute our brave friends whose conduct, protesting against the destruction of the planet, the law wrongly criminalises. Now, Sarah, so what's wrong with Jolyon Morm's perspective there?
He's absolutely right that the law is not always wonderful. There are sometimes very wicked laws, and there's a moral obligation on all of us to think, is this the kind of law that I have to instantly disobey because it's so abhorrent? Or is this the kind of law I will campaign to change while obeying it? I would venture to suggest that in a secular Western democracy, you're not going to find many of the first. there may well be a lot of the second. And I think what Moore and the others are doing are relying on the example of David Perry KC. He got a lot of flack in 2021 for saying he was going to represent the Chinese government who were prosecuting pro-democracy protesters. Now, that arguably, you could say, well, you can't not represent the Chinese government just because people don't like them. That's discrimination. But it is more nuanced than that, because arguably it could be a code of conduct breach to represent a government which was trying to deny such a fundamental human right from its citizens.
Yes.
But that's the distinction, isn't it, between a clear-cut law, which is repulsive, and this rather wider, nebulous, well, we just don't like the politics of the fossil fuel companies.
I mean, that's a different question, isn't it? Because actually we're seeing more and more the politicisation of the law legal profession. Jolyon Moore is a good example. I mean, he runs, what is it, the Good Law Project. I mean, that in itself is a problem, isn't it, when the law becomes politicised?
Absolutely. It's the same reason why it's a problem if you won't represent an individual because you think they're repulsive. I mean, I'm a family lawyer. I've represented paedophiles. Now, is Jolyon Moore saying that as a matter of conscience, I should simply refuse to represent these men, and if I do represent them, I've got to take the risk that people will say, oh, you're a bit pro-paedophile then, are you, Sarah? I mean,
Right.
this is the absurdity. I don't represent men and women who've done horrible things to children because I support their right to do horrible things to children. I represent them because everybody has that right.
So that's a really difficult question, isn't it? Because, of course, even someone who is guilty of such an abhorrent act needs the right to have a defence.
Well,
you know.
I ask everybody, what would you do if you were accused of a serious criminal offence? We know people who are innocent are accused of serious criminal offences.
Exactly.
We know a lot of them go to prison for a very long time. You would want a lawyer who didn't turn around and say, well, I'm not sure about representing you because you're a bit dodgy and I don't want people to judge me. You'd want a lawyer who said, I am going to represent you to the best of my ability without fear and without favour. And that's why this declaration, I think, is so dangerous. You could just dismiss it as empty, preening, posturing, because none of the signatories of that declaration, I think, could get anywhere near a prosecution brief. Jolyon Moore is a tax specialist. One of the signatories of this declaration has been disbarred for contemptuously leaking a Supreme Court judgment.
That sounds like posturing, then.
None of these people are going to get near a criminal court. So you might say, well, why are you worried, Sarah? What's all the fuss about? And the reason I'm worried is what we've just been talking about. This, by extension, saying lawyers must, according to their conscience, decide who they represent. And those of us who will still represent those people must then accept guilt by association.
Well, because if they make a judgment, they're effectively bypassing due process themselves. They're saying, I've decided you're guilty or innocent, so there's that. But this thing about guilt by association, I think, is absolutely key, because more and more that is coming up. Whenever I defend the free speech rights of someone who says something horrible, I'm told that I must therefore endorse the horrible things they've said. This is a broader problem in society now, isn't it?
It's getting really ugly and really dangerous, and I know you are going to talk later about what happened to Kelly J. Keane in Auckland, and that, I think, is a fantastic example of just how dangerous this is.
So we should clarify, Kelly J. Keane, women's rights campaigner, she has this Let Women Speak event in Auckland, New Zealand. The protesters amass around her. We can see some images there. It's absolutely terrifying. There are no police. And it's almost as though the police have absented themselves from the situation. They've left this woman in this very vulnerable position. It's lucky that someone wasn't killed or seriously injured, you know?
It's very lucky. I've seen the footage of I understand, a 70-year-old woman being punched repeatedly in the face, and you've told me you can't show that footage before the watershed because it's too disturbing.
Correct.
Now, we've also got the New Zealand Deputy Prime Minister going on television saying that Kelly J. Keane is abhorrent and ridiculous.
Now, that's actually, we've got that clip, I think. If we can have a look at that clip, because I think that is absolutely key. This is Carmel Sepuloni, the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand.
In my mind, that woman and her views are abhorrent and actually in some ways quite ridiculous. But I guess my personal approach is just to go like this.
Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, what do we do when major political figures are making those kinds of judgments about people who want a conversation and have a different viewpoint? That is the politicisation of, well, I know it's politics, but it means that it has an impact on whether the law is correctly enforced, doesn't it?
You see what happened. I think Kelly J. Keane was lucky to escape with her life, or at least without being seriously hurt. We've seen today at Reformers Tree in Hyde Park, a group of women who believe sex is real, it matters, effectively kettled by protesters and the police walking away. Because this is what the problem with Jolyon Morn and his declaration is. He's a tentacle on this octopus, which is saying, if you don't toe the line and believe what we believe, then you are a non-person. Kelly J. Keane was described variously as a monster, a thing, by people tweeting about her.
One of the politicians described her as that thing.
Yeah, and, you know, we all know how the Rwandan massacre started. People were encouraged to call their opponents cockroaches on the local radio. This is how every demonisation and attack on individuals starts, by dehumanising them. Yes. And Morn doesn't just reserve his ire for the fossil fuels. I'm sure lots of people watching would go, well, they are horrible companies. Yeah, good on you, Jolyon. Remember, this is also the man who called Fair Cop, an organisation of which I am an identifiable public member, akin to a terrorist organisation that should be proscribed. Now, I made a formal complaint about that to the Bar Standards Board because I said that is inflammatory. That is putting me at risk of harm.
Yes.
They weren't interested. Morn has also referred to a serving judge as transphobe adjacent because he didn't like what she was saying. So he doesn't just focus on climate change and fossil fuels. He's part of that much wider movement that says if you do not think as we think, then you are going to be denied the protection of the law, the police, and politicians can talk about you in the language we've just heard.
So we don't have much time, but I know that you've said on Twitter that you actually feel that the signatories here ought to be debarred, in fact. Do you stand by that?
My first instinctive reaction, I think when you asked me about it, was to say disbar the lot. And I thought about it and I reflected. I thought, was that too harsh? No. You cannot be a preening, posturing activist. The code of conduct is not pick and mix. If you've declared you are going to flout one of the cornerstones of our professional ethical obligations, then you can't be a barrister. So I say disbar the lot.
Sarah Phillimore, thank you very much indeed. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, Baroness Claire Fox was disinvited from a university debate because she liked a Ricky Gervais joke. Claire will be joining us, and so will one of the event organisers. See you in a few minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my wonderful panel, Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse. And we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. If you've got any problems at all, I mean, we all do, don't we? So just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will answer your questions live on air. Royal Holloway, University of London, disinvited Baroness Claire Fox from a university debating society because she had expressed approval of a joke made by Ricky Gervais. Fox had been due to speak to students about the importance of discussion, but the Students' Union raised concerns and eventually her appearance was called off. Now, I'm joined in the studio by Omar Lubak, one of the students who actually invited Claire Fox. She'll be with us too in a moment. Omar, welcome to the show. So, you're a student at Royal Holloway. You decided to invite Baroness Claire Fox. What was the idea behind the event?
So the reason why we wanted to invite Baroness Fox is because Baroness Fox is your archetypal perfect type of person you want at a debating society. Director of Academy of Ideas, peer at the House of Lords, journalist since before I was born.
Yes.
So this was something that I thought, as a committee member, the students will look at Claire Fox and say, this is someone that I want to be when I'm older, and Claire Fox will show them how to be that person. And plus, as it was about the idea of debate and why debate is important in society in today's world, I thought would have been a real booster for our students at Royal Holloway.
So the idea then that a discussion about the importance of debate is then shut down, I mean, the irony of this won't have escaped anyone. Who was it who wanted to shut this down, and what happened there?
So after we announced that Claire Fox will be speaking at our university on the end of February, the student union let us know that there were a couple people offended by Claire Fox's views on the transgender community. So this included stuff like the retweet of the Ricky Gervais joke, her views on trans in sports.
So just to be clear, so Ricky Gervais had made a joke which had a theme of transgenderism, and she had retweeted the joke. But it was a joke because it was in a stand-up show and people were laughing in the clip. So we know it was a joke. And that offended people, but also her view that women should have single-sex sports, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's right. And they were offended by this.
They were offended.
And then how did they go about trying to get her cancelled?
So, like the people who have read the articles, if they have read the articles, and if you have seen the emails, the student union kept on reiterating this idea that inviting Claire Fox is as an advocate of hate towards the trans community, whatever that means, that Claire would incite hate towards the people and she'll be a trouble for those people.
Why did the university capitulate to them and not go along with it? Presumably you wanted to keep it, persist and have it go ahead.
So the reason why the university sided with the student union, if that's the question why or what you're asking, is mainly because the student union has this more institutional backing behind it. We're just a debating society. We don't really have that much power. And the reason why the talk got cancelled was because of that. Because other members at the committee thought that it would have been that if we were to side with the student, not side with the student union, but at least just cancel it for their sake, then we won't be in trouble because our funding or their funding is dependent on the student union. Things like going on to competitions is dependent on the student union. So if you were to agree with the student union, we will be safe from that backlash.
I understand. OK, well, let's bring in Baroness Claire Fox now, who's joining us via video link. If we can have her... Hello. Claire Fox, hello. So apparently, according to your detractors, you're an advocate of hate. Is that right?
Absolutely not. And it's so interesting hearing the discussion as described by Omar. I'm not entirely sure that students coming to hear about my career and wanting to be like me would be the end result, because I would have been more than happy to have arguments with people who never want to grow up to be like me. I'm quite controversial in my views on a range of issues, not least about free speech, no ifs, no buts. But of course I don't hate. Who do I hate? I'm for women. I'm for women's rights, and I object to absolutely the way that trans ideology supporters, not necessarily trans people, I hasten to add, trans ideology supporters insist that women's rights and women's sex rights should be undermined in order to accommodate their demands. Anyway, the whole big point was that all that they apparently found as proof and evidence of my hate was one retweet where I congratulated Ricky Gervais for skewering that ideology in 1 minute, which he does, by the way. It's a very funny clip.
Were you particularly surprised that it was a joke that got you in trouble here? I mean, the idea that they're scouring through your Twitter history to find absolutely anything, and that was the best they could do, but not only that, that would be effective from the university's perspective and justification for actually cancelling the event.
Well, I think that the thing that's really harrowing for the students, listen, this is no skin off my nose that I don't have to go and do a talk at a university. I want to make it clear I'm not playing the victim here. But this is a very serious matter in relation to student societies having the freedom and the autonomy to invite who they want. The Debating Society invited me. The student union initially gave them a bit of a hard time investigating whether I was a safeguarding risk, checked me out. I kind of passed somehow some tests that they did. Unbeknownst, this was all happening behind the scenes months ago. And then when they advertised, some societies caused a fuss. And I suppose you could say that I wasn't surprised, but I think that when I heard of the kind of bullying and intimidation and the real strong-arming that went on to the society, I realised that this was an important issue because people don't always, cancel culture isn't a kind of big headline thing. We've heard, let's be honest, when you hear about what's happened to Posey Parker, which we've just heard, or the women today who were out protesting for women's rights and they're harassed and bullied and, facing physical violence, me being cancelled might seem nothing. But from the point of view of academic freedom and a university, the idea that these young people interested in debate, wanting to hear a diverse set of views, the opposite of snowflake students, interested, inquisitive, and that their choice to invite a speaker then led them to be threatened. They were told their reputation would be ruined, that the society's name would be mud. They'd be inviting somebody who's a troublemaker. And of course, they immediately think, God, I don't want my whole life ruined just to have Claire Fox come and speak. And I don't blame them. Why would you? So I think it's the behind-the-scenes, subtle, strong-arming intimidation of students that I wanted to make a fuss about. And if I can finally say, Andrew, you yourself have been involved in speaking, I think, and are due again to speak at something called Living Freedom, which is it's got to the point now where we have to organise, some colleagues of mine, and you're one of the speakers, are organising events where students can go along and talk about the importance of people like John Locke, the letter on toleration, people from history like J.S. Mill, and learn lessons of why free speech is important. And those extra curriculum seminars have been put on in universities because sadly we can't rely on, for example, the management or the senior academics at the Royal Holloway to actually stand up for free speech or instruct or help students understand the importance of academic freedom.
Claire Fox, thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, I just want to quickly bring in Omar again on that point that Baroness Fox is making. From a student's perspective, she very rightly says, what happened here was a lot of young people were deprived of the opportunity to hear what Claire Fox had to say. Is it the case that we are dealing with a generation who are completely intolerant of different viewpoints, or is it just a small minority who have too much clout?
I definitely think it's a small minority that have too much clout. One thing that I have seen after all of this has hit the media is that the silent majority has started to rise up. Claire Fox can talk about this, and I've seen this once we announced the cancellation of Claire Fox, so once this has hit the media, there's been many people, many students at Royal Holloway who have said that this is someone that we wanted to hear speak, and we are very troubled that this talk has been cancelled because of the strong arming of the student union. The institution that is supposed to allow free thinking, it's supposed to allow different views. One of the reasons why I go into higher education is so that I can hear views that might offend me. I study politics, philosophy and economics, and I come across so many texts that I don't like. But at the end of the day, we're all ignorant. And the only way to get smart is hearing views that we may not agree with. And that's how you become smarter. And that is how you take the full advantages of things like university. And it deeply troubles me that there are people in the university who do not agree with that. So this is one of the reasons why I feel like it's very important that we do fight, so that the silent majority can stand up against the minority who are raising their voice, screaming that you cannot hear different opinions because those opinions might offend some people.
Very well said. Omar Lubak, thank you so much for joining me, and to Baroness Claire Fox, thanks very much. Now, a spokesman for Royal Holloway has issued a statement saying, "We are committed to the principles of academic freedom and free speech and aim to create an inclusive and supportive environment for all students and staff. The Royal Holloway Students' Union and its societies work as separate entities from the university and organise events in line with their own processes and procedures. As a university, we will continue to work closely with the Students' Union in relation to the legal and regulatory responsibilities for organising events." After the break on Free Speech Nation, Professor Matthew Goodwin is here to discuss his new book, Values, Voice and Virtue, The New British Politics. See you in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's been a hugely turbulent few years in the world of UK politics. We've had Brexit, numerous elections, and almost as many different prime ministers. Professor of Politics Matthew Goodwin has long tried to make sense of it, and his latest book is called Values, Voice and Virtue, The New British Politics. And Matthew joins me now. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for sending us the book as well. Do you want to just explain to us what is the key thesis of your new book?
Yeah, so basically we've had 10 years of
political chaos. We've had the rise of populism, Brexit, Boris Johnson, the fall of the Red Wall, this realignment of our politics. All I'm saying is, what on earth caused all of that? And the argument essentially is that we have a new elite in Britain, not just in politics, but across much of the media, creative industries, cultural institutions, which no longer reflects the values of the wider country, no longer really gives lots of voters a feeling that they have a voice in the institutions, and is embracing this very toxic identity politics, which I don't think actually is going to bring people back together. I think it's going to push us apart. And so many people do now feel politically homeless. They don't know who they're going to vote for next time. Where has this come from? I mean, it didn't always used to be the case, did it? As you say, this is a relatively recent development.
Yeah, well, actually, about 60% of people out there feel that neither left nor right really reflect their values. And one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was partly to say, actually, I wanted to sort of represent some of those views and opinions and just try and put across a different view about why we're here. And I think, one of the things that's happened is over the last 20 years, a lot of these cultural issues, identity issues, immigration, gender, national identity have become much more important in politics, whereas perhaps in the older days used to be much more about economics. And what's happened is this new elite that's risen to sort of represent the institutions just thinks very, very differently from most voters on these issues. They've really gone all in on this radical, progressive worldview, which really isn't shared by the vast majority of people out there.
And let's take the example of Brexit. 70% of Labour constituencies voted to leave, and yet you had a Labour Party that decided to run on a manifesto where they said, we'll make you vote again because you probably got it wrong. The public had to watch Parliament effectively trying to undo the largest democratic mandate in British history. It's almost like they're living in this bubble and they don't get that people can see what they're up to.
I think, well, also on Brexit, don't forget 3% of Labour MPs actually campaigned to leave, whereas 150 Labour-held seats voted to leave. I think there is a bubble element going on here, but I think also what we've seen is essentially the political and the media class double down on themselves. All of the institutions really are now disproportionately dominated by people who tended to go to the same universities, but also in these cultural questions tend to hold the same sets of values. So if you look at things like, how we're told about, the rise of gender identity, or we're told that, British history is primarily bad, it's negative, or if you look at the discussion around small boats, that actually we should just be more relaxed about this, we shouldn't try and control our national borders. Look, most people don't think that way. Most people are very concerned about these issues. They want their governments to solve them. And I think this increasingly radical class that is dominating the institutions is actually losing touch with a lot of people out there in the country. And to be honest, Andrew, the reason I wrote this book as well is I'm concerned because I think if you look at the last 10 years, we don't want to become America, I don't think. We don't want the tribalism, we don't want the polarisation. But if we don't actually manage to close these divides, that is where we're going to end up. We're going to end up in a much more tribal place.
Is part of the problem that there isn't that much to distinguish between the Conservatives and Labour, insofar as Labour clearly have bought into this very identitarian worldview, but a lot of the radical cultural shifts over the past 12 years have actually happened under the Conservatives. So
exactly.
Really, you can't vote for anyone who would get us out of that.
Well, there is a new consensus in British politics which is shared by both the left and the right. Both basically were instinctively opposed to Brexit, were instinctively opposed to lowering immigration, and are instinctively opposed to pushing back against this radical progressivism in the institutions. They view it as sort of cultural politics. They don't want to go near it. And I think many voters really are looking at the parties and thinking, well, I don't share your values anymore. You don't represent me anymore. And I think, therefore, unless we can find a way of dealing with that and giving people a sense that they are in the national conversation, they have a voice. You look at the BBC homepage every day. It's like this sort of worldview of the 10% or the 15%. And that's roughly where radical progressives are. They represent about 15% of the country, but they dominate many of the institutions.
And doesn't that lead in a lack of trust for these major institutions, what they call a legitimation crisis?
Well, that's what we're seeing. You're seeing trust in established legacy media decline. You're seeing trust in Parliament and political parties decline. The big winner at the next election, personally, I think, won't be the Labour Party. The big winner will be apathy. It will be lots of people saying, look, I'm not going to vote at this election. I tried to change the system through all of these things that we've gone through over the last 10 years. It's still the same. It's still pro-globalization, pro-migration, increasingly sort of intolerant of people who hold different views and beliefs. People are looking at what's happening in schools and universities and this sort of imposition of this political dogma, and they can't see anybody who's going to speak up and do anything about it. So my fear is either people just withdraw from the political system en masse, or we end up going down some other road of populism where somebody stands up and says they are going to do something about it. And none of those outcomes, personally, I don't think are particularly good.
Well, Matthew, your book is called Values of Voice and Virtue. That's available now. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thank you. Appreciate it. So that is all for the first hour of Free Speech Nation, but we have an awful lot more to come. After my break, myself and my two guests will be discussing what has been happening in New Zealand to Kelly J. Keane, the women's rights campaigner, also known as Posey Parker, and we're going to get some more questions from our lovely studio audience. See you in just a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including a discussion about Posey Parker's persecution in New Zealand, more audience questions, and we'll ask why the police are not being taught about free speech. But let's get a news update first from Ray Addison.
Thanks, Andrew. Good evening. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Tensions have heightened between Russia and Ukraine, with the country's state media saying a blast in the Tula region was caused by a Ukrainian drone packed with explosives. 3 people were reportedly injured when they were struck by shrapnel. However, Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the alleged attack. It follows pleas from the European Union for Russia to halt the stationing of nuclear weapons in Belarus. Kyiv's foreign ministry has called the decision provocative and is calling for a session of the UN Security Council. England has beaten Ukraine 2-0 in their Group C Euro qualifiers match. Both teams joined for a photograph before the game as players clutched a Ukrainian flag with peace written across it. The FA had given 1,000 free tickets to Ukrainian refugees and their British hosts to attend the game. First-half goals from Harry Kane and Bukayo Saka were enough to seal the win. The teams will face off again in September. Offenders who commit antisocial behaviour will be forced to clean up their communities as part of the Prime Minister's new immediate justice scheme. Under the plans to be announced tomorrow, local authorities will be given new powers to quickly and visibly punish criminals. Those who spray graffiti or commit other vandalism will have to fix the damage within 48 hours. Other penalties include picking up litter, washing police cars or doing unpaid work in shops. Well, as part of the crackdown, the government has also announced a ban on the sale of laughing gas. Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove telling broadcasters that nitrous oxide canisters are helping to fuel antisocial behaviour and turning public spaces into drug-taking arenas. The US president has declared a state of emergency in Mississippi after a tornado killed at least 26 people. The twister swept through the state and on into Alabama, cutting a path of destruction 170 miles long. Around 11,000 residents there are still without power. They say there was no safe place to hide. Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, says they need to be more prepared for disastrous weather.
We see extreme weather events only increasing in gravity, in severity, and in frequency. And we have to build our communities to be best prepared for them, to prevent the devastation to the extent possible, to be able to quickly respond and recover, to prove ourselves resilient.
We're on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Now back to Free Speech Nation.
Two days ago in Auckland, New Zealand, Kelly J. Keane, a women's rights activist, was physically assaulted at her Let Women Speak event. She had called it Let Women Speak because she believes that women who have concerns about their sex-based rights are often silenced. And in an effort to disprove her arguments, large groups of angry men turned up to stop her from speaking. Here's an example of some of the protesters in action. I can't think why women would want men like this out of their spaces. Clearly, they must be evil bigots. It's the only explanation. Well, that was the conclusion of most of the Australian and New Zealand media. Newshub, a major New Zealand TV channel, decided that it would smear the Let Women Speak event as anti-trans. This is something, by the way, that both The Guardian and the Daily Mail have also done this weekend, which is a reminder that the culture war has nothing to do with left or right. That said, Newshub took it a step further, defaming Kelly J. Keane, also known as Posey Parker, as a white supremacist. In other words, rather than engage in actual journalism, they uncritically repeated the accusations of the most dishonest of Keane's critics. Great job, guys. Here's what they had to say.
Immigration New Zealand has decided to allow the controversial anti-trans campaigner known as Posey Parker into New Zealand. They reviewed her case on safety grounds after her rally in Melbourne attracted neo-Nazis.
Now, it is true that there were neo-Nazis at the Let Women Speak rally in Melbourne, but as the Australian Jewish Council noted, these were thugs who saw an opportunity to hijack the event for their own publicity. In fact, the neo-Nazis were clashing with Socialist Alliance, a supposedly anti-fascist group, who nonetheless seemed to be more concerned with shutting down a women's gathering than confronting, you know, the actual fascists. And yet, because these opportunistic neo-Nazi miscreants had gatecrashed the event, the Australian media conflated them with the women, claiming that they were allies. Because, of course, fascists are well known for their profound concern for women's safeguarding. Anyway, let's get back to NewsHub and their incredibly sophisticated journalism.
Has issued direct threats to the Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what, Chris.
Using a hand signal linked to white supremacists, which we've chosen to blur.
Revoke my visa. At your peril.
Wait, what? Kelly J. Keane has previously described white supremacy and racism as having no place in a civilised society. So if she was lying about that and wanted to keep her evil views secret, why would she start making overt white power gestures with her hand? None of this makes sense until you take away the blurring effect that NewsHub have put on the clip. NewsHub would like you to believe that this is the OK symbol, which has been co-opted by certain far-right groups. But when you watch the original footage, you can see she's just adjusting the zip on her top.
Let me just tell you this. Revoke my visa. At your peril.
But of course, by blurring it out, NewsHub can make it look a lot more sinister. As the commentator and podcaster Stephen Knight pointed out on his latest Substack, in that same video, Keane goes on to defend the speech rights of Maori women. As Knight puts it, that's an odd flex for someone intending to signal to their white supremacist supporters. Of course, defamation is a common tactic nowadays. People don't want to engage in discussion, so they make up lies instead. But if you're going to lie, at least make it vaguely plausible. NewsHub are openly misleading their viewers, presumably because they think their viewers are too stupid to know how to use a search engine. Well, job done. The lies have been spread, the temperature has been raised, and this is the result. So this footage is from the Let Women Speak event in Auckland, and there's also now footage circulating online of an elderly female attendee being punched at full force in the face by one of the protesters. Like all bullies, they pick on the weakest targets. The footage itself is actually too disturbing for us to show. No police were present, just a baying mob, mostly men, pushing, shoving and screaming abuse at one woman. If the stewards hadn't been so courageous, Keane could have been killed. And that, of course, is where all of this is leading. We are continually hearing that there is bad behaviour on both sides of this debate. I'm sorry, this is just not sustainable anymore. I've seen a few women's rights campaigners use abusive terms, throwing insults, and yes, behaving badly. But I've never seen women's rights campaigners sending death threats, rape threats, or attempting to punch anyone who takes an opposing view. Yet we see this all the time from trans activists. Not trans people, by the way, most of whom want to get on with their lives in peace and are extremely ill-served by these so-called allies who claim to represent them. J.K. Rowling, who has never said anything transphobic in her life, is nonetheless smeared as a hateful bigot and inundated on a daily basis with death threats. She has said she received so many that she could paper the house with them. And this is the point. It isn't just one or two bad apples. This kind of behaviour is the norm in this particular activist community. If you don't believe me, you can take a look at the website turfisaslur.com, where you can see hundreds of screenshots of violent threats and imagery against women campaigning for their rights. I won't show the worst ones here, they're far too disturbing, but here are some of the milder examples. Any trans allies at Pride London right now need to step the F up and take out the TERF trash. Get in their faces, make them afraid. Debate never works, so F them up. If you're a TERF, you can get effed with the business end of the barbed wire baseball bat. Stab a TERF today. Remember to twist the knife and then remove it. These examples go on and on and on and on. And you know who doesn't post messages like this? Women. And yet many of the people issuing these threats want us to believe that they are women. It's hardly the most persuasive tactic. Here's what one activist wrote after watching the violence in Auckland. I got turned on today watching the fear in Posey Parker's eyes. She actually was fearing for her life. And you know who doesn't get sexually aroused by mob violence? Women. And most men, as it happens, but definitely not women. And yet so many mainstream commentators refuse to condemn these activists. They think this is simply a fragile, marginalised group standing up for themselves. A group so marginalised that they have the support of all major corporations and public institutions, are able to call on the police to arrest those who refuse to use the language that they demand, and are able to bully and physically assault women who are gathering peacefully to express their views. And the media and political class cheer them on. And this is entirely backward, and it has to stop, because somebody is going to get seriously hurt. Look at this post from a couple of days ago by Stephen Shaviro, an academic at Wayne State University in Detroit. So here is what I think about free speech on campus. Although I do not advocate violating federal and state criminal codes, I think it is far more admirable to kill a racist, homophobic or transphobic speaker than it is to shout them down. That's an actual professor working at an actual university. Now, there are many obvious objections to this. Firstly, that murder is never justifiable. Secondly, it's probably not a great idea to be openly advocating for murder on your Facebook page. I mean, it's not a great endorsement for the institution, is it? Come to Wayne State University, kids, where you can be taught by total sociopaths. But what Shaviro fails to take into account is that virtually everyone who is branded a racist, homophobe or transphobe these days is nothing of the kind. And in that context, when these terms are so misused so often, surely it's a little unwise to be claiming that murdering anyone so described is admirable. And the history books are full of this kind of thing. People demonising certain groups as subhuman in order to justify appalling violence and atrocities. If you call someone a TERF, they're no longer a human being. They're a cockroach, and cockroaches can be crushed. We are dealing with an ideological movement which is largely composed of fantasists who see Nazis in every shadow, who monster anyone who doesn't think it's fair for women to compete with biological males in sport, or anyone who doesn't think violent male rapists ought to be accommodated in women's prisons, or anyone who understands that sex is binary and that speaking the truth still matters. In other words, the people these activists consider to be mortal enemies, these Nazis of the imagination, comprise the overwhelming majority of the public. And that's a lot of Nazis. And this is the context in which Kelly J. Keane has been smeared, first by activists, then by the mainstream press. We are told that women's rights is a Trojan horse for fascism. And this misapprehension was made explicit in this cartoon in the New Zealand Herald. Here you can see Kelly J. Keane depicted as a large wooden horse surrounded by neo-Nazis. I have to say, I don't think this cartoonist understands what a Trojan horse is. I doubt very much the Greeks would have made it into the city of Troy if they'd been standing outside the horse. Kind of defeats the purpose. Surely the Trojan horse metaphor would work much better for individuals who, I don't know, claim to be compassionate and on the right side of history, but routinely send threats of death and rape to anyone who challenges their worldview. Gender identity ideology is often presented as sweet and cuddly with glitter and rainbow flags and be kind hashtags. But like the Trojan horse, there are plenty of angry men inside waiting to commit bloody carnage. So in this section of Free Speech Nation, I want to discuss this issue with two fantastic guests. I have today the author Ella Whelan here in the studio, and down the line, Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. Welcome both. Ella, I want to come to you first. So we've all seen this footage, absolutely horrific footage in New Zealand. Posey Parker or Kelly J. Keane is having this Let Women Speak event, and protesters turn up, the police are absent, and it turns violent. What is happening here? Why is this becoming more common?
Well, I just think it's remarkable that you have, politicians in New Zealand very sort of seriously discussing banning Kelly Jane Keane from entering because of the supposed dangers that she poses, and then failing to provide any kind of security, any kind of police presence for what was very clearly from the start going to be a violent, they themselves said there's probably going to be violence at this event.
Yes.
And so then, there's a very clear decision being made there, which is that the kind of pretend danger is the one they care about, but the real danger posed to the women that took part in that rally is nothing to worry about. And I don't know what you call that other than a certain kind of judgment that women who hold these kind of views don't matter. I mean, Posey Parker, Kelly Jane Keane has often said that she is the wrong kind of woman, and there's a real, uncomfortable question for a lot of people who are involved in the sort of gender critical discussions about the fact that she has seen the rough end of this kind of campaign for a very long time, with sort of limited solidarity, and unless women like her stick their neck out on the line, quite literally. I mean, it's remarkable reading The Guardian saying, they described what happened to her as she was doused in tomato soup. As if it was like someone just poured a friendly can over her head.
And as if this whole thing wasn't filmed and people can check it for themselves.
Yeah.
This was a scary, violent, intimidating event.
Yeah, but I think that I think she's to be commended for the fact that she continues to go out. She does, and there are lots of, the reason why this is so important was because there is a big debate to be had about how we respond to a kind of trans ideology. Some people think that, Posey Parker's in-your-face way of doing it is, I think, probably in some circumstances at this point, it's probably the only way to do it. Some people take a sort of different view in terms of how we handle gender ideology. But what there should be no argument about is that when women try and organise a space for them to talk about, literally having the word woman erased in lots of areas of public life, that you don't get decked. That's probably the bare minimum. I would have thought.
Let's bring in Helen Joyce on this very question. Helen, thanks so much for joining us. I do want to ask you about that question. That a lot of the protesters are the kinds of activists who will say that words are violence, and that Posey Parker's very presence there is tantamount to violence. And of course, this is perhaps a means by which they can justify their own authentically violent acts.
I think they think that they can. Their activism is super linguistic, funnily, although it's backed up with physical violence. And they think that if they can silence you, they don't need to even turn up to a protest. And that has worked remarkably well over the last several years. I think what we're seeing now is that women standing up for their rights are starting to make some headway. So just the day before Posey was threatened so horribly in New Zealand, we saw World Athletics finally say that men who call themselves women are not allowed to compete in women's sports. And that was great. We had 24 hours of being really cheerful here and praising the campaigners who had worked so hard to make this happen. And then we see this. So I think the violence is because the silencing hasn't worked. I mean, there's a very classed way of talking about Posey. So Posey isn't invited, as I was last year, to Cambridge colleges to say exactly the same thing. I say the same thing as her. I say that men cannot be women and that women cannot have rights unless women can say that anywhere they like. She stands in a park and says it, and I've been to some of her events and I stand completely with her. I get invited to a Cambridge college. There are still baying mobs. The policing and the managing of these events is equally poor in both circumstances in this country, even worse in New Zealand, but we are doing the same thing. The people who think that Posey is maybe too populist or that she in some way brings it on herself, well, I bring it on myself too then. I stand completely with her. I'm just doing it in a different place, that's all.
I mean, a lot of the violence is justified because what they say is that she is a Nazi, she is far right, and these kind of smears are used to justify the violence. I want to just bring in for both of you, there was an event today in Hyde Park. It was the monthly Let Women Speak event. It just happens to have fallen just after this event. And Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, was present, and he actually filmed the police walking away. I wonder if we can see...
OK, so I'm just approaching it now. A bunch of cops over here, walking away. Look at that, walking away. And meanwhile, this is going on over here. These men are intimidating women, and these policemen are walking away.
And then just to put that into context, we actually have some footage from what was going on within the women's gathering there, if we can just show that as well. OK, so Ella, can I just ask you about this? So there we have the people speaking at Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner, which is what it's designed for, completely surrounded by protesters chanting, "The only good Nazi is a dead one." It strikes me that this tactic of smearing someone as a Nazi and then using that to justify violent behaviour. That seems to be the way it's going.
Yeah, well, if we lived in a kind of normal world where we didn't throw labels around like this all the time and didn't take them so seriously, you would say, like, this is such an incredibly childish way of responding politically to someone. The kind of, I've seen them when I've gone to protests, these kind of trans activists are often overgrown teenagers who've never been told no in their life, and that's part of why they respond this way. But if, the police are the people that are supposed to take seriously threats of violence. I mean, they lock people up all the time for doing very much less on social media. But, they're in an awkward position now because they are supposed to be, jailing people for writing limericks about trans ideology. So then it's awkward for them to go in and then arrest those very same people who are literally calling for threats on women's lives. And I think you need to make a very clear point here of saying in any other situation that wasn't related to the trans discussion, if women were being threatened in this way, it would be we would be talking about it for months. They would be all over every single newspaper. But because, and Helen makes a very good point, because it's to the gender ideology and because it's Posey Parker, who has a particular kind of, no-nonsense working-class way about her that doesn't, sticks in a lot of people's craws, especially even within the gender-critical movement, no one wants to know.
Helen, can I ask you for your response to that? I mean, we saw the police walking away and failing to do anything about it. That was in London today. That was just a few hours ago. What's your response to that?
So one of my friends was there. Graham is also a friend, but I haven't spoken to him since. And she said it was completely terrifying. They were surrounded. She got there before most other people, and there were about 8 of them completely surrounded. And then when some more women turned up, they felt a bit better. But again, they got hemmed in. The police didn't seem to care. The one that I was at in Brighton most recently, we couldn't be heard. Like, we could only be heard on the live stream, not in person, because the shouting was so loud over us. That's not free speech. The police said apparently to the stewards today that it's the free speech of the protesters to be able to shout over women with their, the vuvuzelas and the megaphones. That's not free speech. That's the heckler's veto. They should be moved back so that we can be heard and not feel so intimidated. I should say that a bunch of women's rights campaigners and gay rights campaigners and general free speech groups like the Free Speech Union, Sex Matters, LGB Alliance and others have written to the UK government and asked it to make representations to the New Zealand High Commissioner, asking how come our citizens aren't able to go to New Zealand and be protected by the police from this sort of violent threat and then have to leave early rather than being able to exercise ordinary democratic rights to talk to each other. And I hope we get a response. From now on, I'm going to be going to every single one of these events that I possibly can, and I call on everyone else to do so too, because if women cannot stand in a public place and say in any ordinary words they like, men cannot be women, and if you say they can be women, then you are destroying women's rights, then we do not have any women's rights. So we have to start saying it, even if we're scared.
And finally, Ella, because we don't have much time, but I just want to ask you, given the kind of footage that we've been showing tonight, given that it doesn't look as though you can possibly reason with these people, that they are caught up in some kind of hysteria where they do genuinely see everyone as Nazis, how can we possibly address this issue?
I think people have to start finding their mettle and standing alongside women who say these kind of things. And if you get called a transphobe and if you get into hot water in whatever part of your life, then so be it. I think there are things that are more important and that we have to sacrifice certain things in our life for, like, saying things that are true, that women are women and men are men. And also I think we need to start calling out the police. I mean, I used to live in Brighton and there was the annual EDL march, and it would be sort of like 6 drunk EDL members protected by about 45 police, and then there was, we would be on a counter demonstration. But the idea that this is just how the police operate is an absolute nonsense. It's not that I want more coppers around protests, and I think free speech is very important, as you well know on this show. But there's something going on here where there's a real cowardice in actually confronting the fact that in pretty much all areas of life, whether it's on the media, in newspapers, in workplaces, even people among friends, women aren't able to talk about this, and something needs to change.
Ella Whelan and Helen Joyce, thank you both for joining me very much. Really appreciate it. After the break on Free Speech Nation, it'll be high time we get some more questions from our lovely studio audience. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from our audience here. The first question we've got is from Izzy. Where is Izzy? Hello.
Hello, Andrew. Is the phrase dark horse racist?
Yeah, so an employment tribunal ruled that the phrase dark horse shouldn't be considered racially offensive. This was a black worker who tried to sue the Citizens Advice Bureau because her manager had used the term, but the judge said the phrase means someone who has hidden talents, which we always know, and that's what it's an idiom, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, he's not literally talking about a dark horse.
Yeah, and she's an idiot. This is an absolute nonsense. But, I mean, I don't really blame the person who's brought this complaint, because we've had years now of people being told that everything and anything is racist. And if somebody says something and you construe it as racist, then it's definitely racist. And even if they haven't said anything and you haven't construed it as racist, it's still racist.
Well, that's actually built into the Crown Prosecution Service and the government's guide on hate crime. They say it's to do with the perception of what they call the victim, not even the complainant. They've already decided that's a victim. So they say it's all about perception. Yeah. So I could decide that you're just being really homophobic to me now.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because.
And the same person complained about the term porcupines and also witch hunt, and said that they were racist as well. And at least dark horse or something. Well, at least dark horse is like, it's got the word dark in it. I mean, porcupines, there's nothing racist in there unless it was like overly seasoned or something. I don't know.
Diane, what on earth do you make of this? I mean, are people just becoming more easily offended all the time?
Well, this is a very interesting case because this woman, as Leo said, raised many, many complaints against the Citizens Advice Bureau, who tend to be the more liberal amongst us because they deal with people who are very different on a daily basis. And the judge said that it was a very wearing case because she was very incoherent, her evidence didn't make sense, or her evidence contradicted itself. And what I think we've got an example of is somebody who thinks that she can play cards that she hasn't got. And the problem with this is that when somebody has a genuine complaint, the waters may get muddy because this woman has sucked up somebody else's time and patience.
That's a really good point. But, I mean, you're saying it does sound opportunistic.
Yes.
But then when there is a genuine case of someone being racist in the workplace, people might start thinking, oh, it's probably the same sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, very bad.
This kind of case is an issue when you've got somebody... The judge said that it was very... You could tell that the judge was emotionally tired from dealing with
I'm feeling a bit tired, even thinking about it. OK, next question now is from Gillian. Where's Gillian?
Hi.
Hi.
Is cutting down trees the way to combat climate change?
Greta Thunberg would love this. I love this story. So these council leaders, they backed a plan to cut down, this is near Cambridge, by the way, they backed this plan to cut down 500 trees in an orchard near Cambridge because they want to build a bus route. But the argument is that the bus route makes it quicker to travel and therefore gets us closer to net zero. I think it reduces the bus time by something like 10 seconds. So let's just raise a whole 500 trees.
Yeah.
In the name of the environment.
Yeah, well, this is government. Whenever you get government to do something, they're going to do it badly and it's going to be completely counter to the original intent. This is why we should have smaller government. If we had a government so small, it just collected the rubbish and, cleaned the streets that exist, we wouldn't be in this state. And also, we'd be paying about 10 pence in tax each.
Right, well, there's that. Diane, I mean, come on.
This is absolutely ridiculous because, you also think about the person who uses the bus. Number one, shouldn't the bus be electric? So surely doesn't this take away from the need to make the road 10 seconds shorter?
Yeah.
Also, I don't know about you, but every time I've got on a bus, there's somebody who takes at least half a minute to work out where they put their card, their money, they have to load their shopping on. So buses have to wait anyway. The fact that they're going to destroy this beautiful 1,000-year-old orchard, and it's an orchard as well with like plum trees.
Oh, I've seen the images. It's gorgeous.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. And they want to just pave it with tarmac. And do you know what I think is the problem here? They narrowly won the vote. There were 33 people who voted for it, 26 against. But there have been 2,300 residents complaining. So how have you got a democracy where 2,300 people say it's wrong, but 33 people say it's OK?
I think we should go and tie ourselves to the trees. Let's do that straight. I'm going to do that straight after the show. Our next question is from Cerise. Where is Cerise? Hello.
Are you concerned about sex education in Scotland?
I mean, this has got to go to Leo, but so this was a report in the Telegraph. I actually couldn't believe this. So Scottish children as young as 11 are being taught that if they're not really sure about their sexual orientation, they are queer. Right now, I didn't even know what sexual orientation was when I was 11. These are teaching materials which have been from this top Edinburgh State School, which is called Brommuir High. I hope I pronounced that right. No idea. It's in that sort of foreign country.
It's like watching somebody try and order from a menu.
So, Leo, I mean, you must have thought... This is your homeland.
Yes.
So you must have some thoughts about this. I do hold you responsible.
I mean, 11 does sound young, but bear in mind the life expectancy for people in Scotland and the S&P is about 18. So this is middle-aged, you know? No, I mean, the stuff that they're being taught, it's... they're being taught, like, pretty advanced sexual materials.
Yeah. It's quite extreme, and we also saw this. There was that report about the Isle of Man school that was doing very extreme graphic sexual materials that were being taught in school. And then you have people in Parliament, like the SNP MP John Nicholson, claiming this is a myth. And it was great because the Safe Schools Alliance then posted all the evidence of this stuff to his Twitter account, and he blocked them and then carried on saying, yeah, the evidence doesn't exist. Because, of course, if you don't read the evidence, it's not there.
I think the problem is we haven't had any scrutiny on sex education in schools, which is, quite an important thing. So nefarious elements have moved into that space, and they're trying to push push an agenda, not just teaching things like some of the teaching is around how to safely choke a sexual partner, which I'm pretty sure an 11-year-old doesn't need to know how
I would
to
also
safely.
say the safe way to do that is not to choke your partner.
Exactly. Don't be. And this is like the new version of the Tango advert when pupils were going around deafening each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the Isle of Man, there's the drag queen who went into school to teach the kids that there are 72 genders. When a child put their hand up and said, "I think there's only 2," the drag queen said, "You've offended me. Get out of the classroom."
Yeah. Amazing. Diane, this is partly the problem. It's not just the sexually graphic elements, which of course is a problem for children, but the fact that they're teaching them what is effectively a new religion, the idea that there are 72 different genders. It's a faith, and they're teaching it as though it's fact, rather than just saying, some people believe this, which I'd be fine with that, by the way.
Yeah.
But just saying, no, this is definitely the case to a small child, that is a problem.
Yeah, there is an issue because personal social health education in schools does not have a clear enough framework around it. It doesn't have clear enough rules, actually. I used to be a teacher, and when we had to do this sort of thing, you literally get a pack.
Yeah.
And you sort of get this thing and you have to suddenly read it, and it's not your subject because you're usually, like, I taught drama and other things. Like when we had to teach the kids about the EU, I didn't know a ruddy thing about the EU, and I didn't realise they had to do, like, speeches on it. And my kids got up and started talking about Eurovision and Gina G. And I was like, well, that's what I know. And the point is that it actually does need to come from government, in my opinion. I think there need to be clearer guidelines, because right now, education is like the Wild West.
Yes.
We have a lot of academies, we have a lot of different schools teaching a lot of different things, and it means that people can push certain ideologies left, right and centre.
Well, loads of activists are effectively bringing this stuff in through the back door. The government probably doesn't even know it's going on, to be honest.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, there needs to be a clearer framework, and you do need to sort of say, OK, some people believe this, some people believe that, but equally you do have a lot of religious schools.
Yes.
So,
sure.
Yeah, education as a whole, there does need to be more of a focus on what is the national curriculum.
Yeah. Great. Well done as well for knowing what PSHE stands for, because I don't know anyone else who does. and I used to be a teacher as well, and I never bothered to learn. OK, after the break on Free Speech Nation, a Freedom of Information request has uncovered police forces around the country aren't trained in free speech laws. This might explain an awful lot. Toby Young from the Free Speech Union, who made the request, joins me next. See you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Doobs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A Freedom of Information request by the Free Speech Union has found that police forces across the country aren't training their officers in Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects free speech. The report claims officers are only being taught about gender ideology. So here to discuss this report, which is called The Urgent Need to Teach Police About Free Speech, is Toby Young of the Free Speech Union. Welcome, Toby. So, could you tell me about the Freedom of Information request? Did you put it in on a hunch that this is the kind of thing you would discover?
Yeah, well, it was actually the idea of Carrie Clark, our research officer. She sent FOI requests to all 41 police forces in England and Wales to ask them what kind of training on the legal protections there are for free speech that they receive in the course of learning how to be police officers.
Yes.
And the answer was really shocking. Several of the police forces responded by sending us what they were training by way of equity, diversity and inclusion, as though that was a response to our question about Article 10. Clearly didn't know what Article 10 was. Many of them just didn't provide any training at all on Article 10. Those that did only provided about 1 line worth of training. So we concluded that of the respondents, 78% of police forces said that their police officers received either no training on Article 10 or an absolutely negligible amount. When we also asked them about whether they were training their officers in equity, diversity and inclusion, the floodgates just opened. 56% claimed it was embedded all the way through the training they provide their officers. 4 of them said they provide so much EDI training, just to respond to our request, would exceed the cost limit of FOI requests. 14 said that it was embedded in their EDI training like a golden thread running all the way through it.
Well, at least they're being poetic about it.
I guess they're being poetic about it, but it was extraordinary.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because increasingly, it seems as though there is actually a conflict between EDI training and free speech, almost as though if you prioritise the ideology that sort of underlies EDI training, you are actually against free speech. Is that right?
I think that is right. It is absolutely in conflict with free speech. They think, having been taught by Stonewall and mermaids and gendered intelligence, one of the forces was doing training centred around the genderbread person, which distinguishes between, your anatomical sex and your gender expression.
Your soul.
Your soul.
Right.
Your gendered soul.
Yes.
They're taught to really value and respect whatever these minority groups, these identity groups, hold sacred. So they really do think it's their job to protect trans rights activists, for instance, from hearing hurty words. And if someone wears a T-shirt saying woman equals adult human female, or if they say on Twitter that they don't think trans women are women, the police will now go round to their house, threaten them with arrest unless they come down to the station to have a conversation about it, and will often record non-crime hate incidents against their names, which show up on an enhanced criminal record.
So, I mean, it would be one thing, wouldn't it, if they were trained that, if someone is attacked for being gay or for being trans or whatever, you address that and deal with it because that's against the law, that's fair enough. But being offended, the idea that someone's their feelings are hurt because of words that other people have said, I mean, that's just a complete leap, isn't it?
It's a complete leap. And not only are they interpreting the law, whereby they think they're obliged to record non-crime hate incidents against people's names if they've said something politically incorrect that an activist group has complained about. And the Free Speech Union calculates that about 250,000 NCHIs have been recorded against people's
Non-crime hate incidents.
Non-crime hate incidents since 2014. So that's an average of about 66, 67 a day. I mean, you wonder why, you know, when you get burgled or your car gets broken into, the police don't come round. It's because they're far too busy policing our tweets to police our streets. My advice, if you do get burgled, Andrew, when you call up the local police station, say that the burglar, in addition to trampling all over your most treasured possessions, defecating on your carpet, urinating in your sink, in addition, he spray-painted trans women on the wall. You'll have 5 officers round there and a helicopter within about 30 seconds.
I mean, you paint a hell of a picture there, Toby. But, yeah, I mean, is it possible, would it be conceivable that we could actually embed free speech training into the police in the way that they have done with EDA training?
I think they're going to have to, because Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, issued this new code of practice about the recording and retention of non-crime hate incidents and advised the police for the first time to be mindful of the legal protections for free speech, both Article 10 in the European Convention on Human Rights and also our common law protections for free speech. She says the police have got to be mindful of this and use their common sense and not just chalk up these borderline criminal records against someone just for being politically incorrect. But the problem is, how can the police be mindful of the laws protecting free speech and balance them properly against the need to protect minority groups from harassment and intimidation if they don't know anything about free speech, if the only training they receive is all on one side of the aisle?
Toby Young, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. So, after the break on Free Speech Nation, Michael Gove is lost for words and a dog does some painting. It's almost time for social sensations. See you in a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time for Social Sensations. This is the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral on social media. And first up is this video. Scotland, of course, will be having a new First Minister, and Michael Gove did not want to miss the chance to pay tribute to the previous incumbent.
Nicola Sturgeon's last morning in the office is tomorrow. What do you think her biggest achievement is?
Do you know what? I think it's fair enough. I'm with him. I mean, I would struggle, Leo.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest achievement is that Scotland didn't completely catch fire.
That's not bad.
There's not much you can say. I mean, across all metrics you can measure a government on, across health, education, life expectancy, Nicola Sturgeon has really sort of dragged Scotland backwards about 25 years.
But even by her own aims, you know, she wanted independence. But the ratings for independence, they were nearly there. They were nearly at the 50-50 mark for Scottish independence, and now it's dropped down by like 6 points or something. They're nowhere near.
Yeah, I think when the bin men decided to strike because they were so angry with Nicola Sturgeon, I think that knocked independence really off course because, like you said, it literally plunged them back, I would say, further than 20 years. Because we were all there. A lot of us were up in Edinburgh when the bin strikes were happening. And do you remember when they had the climate change conference and then all the bin strikers struck in Glasgow as well?
Yes.
So, I mean...
But also pushing through self-ID when 2/3 of your voters don't want you to. It's not great, is it?
And not being able to actually agree with your own policy. She was asked on the news, she was asked, you know, do you think that Isla Graham, or is it Isla Bryson?
Isla Bryson.
Isla Bryson, the trans male rapist who was sent to a women's prison. Nicola Sturgeon was asked, is Isla Bryson a woman? She couldn't answer that question, even though Isla Bryson obviously isn't a woman, but under Nicola Sturgeon's laws,
she would be.
He
would be.
Yeah.
It's so confusing. Okay, and next, they always make me include an animal doing something lovable in the show, so this week is no different. Here's a dog painting.
I wanna forget my bad days, all my bad days, and be okay, and be okay. Spend my spare change down at the arcade, and then I'll say everything sucks.
I mean, it's rubbish, isn't it? It's just a terrible painting, so I don't know what we're getting up. I mean, happy about this.
Better than I expected.
It's really good. I mean, the flower was in the middle. It had a stalk. It had petals. It had the pollen in the middle.
You think this is cute? They might have been training him by burning his feet with cigarette butts. And you don't know.
Andrew.
Well, I don't know.
Obviously been coached. I mean, because you can teach those dogs to do anything. You can teach them to round up sheep.
Yeah.
But the question is, was that art or pornography?
There we go. That's a good callback to earlier. If you've just caught the end of the show, that'll make no sense. OK, this is the part where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. I think we've got some time today for that. The first dilemma came in from Anna in West Drayton. She says, I ordered a new wardrobe and spent a day off with my daughter putting it up. It looks great. But my colleague says that was a total waste of a day off and I should have paid the delivery crew 50 quid to put it up for me. What do you reckon, Leo?
I mean, it depends how much you can earn in a day, I guess, or how much you enjoyed, how much of a bonding experience it was. If you really enjoy putting up wardrobes, then that's great. It's like getting a new jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. But isn't the point there that she's trying, exactly what you say, bond with her daughter? Why would this person be so cynical and come back and say this really quite... a colleague as well?
Also, I mean, I've got the feeling that wardrobe's going to fall down.
Do you think? Well, just because of where it's from or because the child was involved with putting it up? Okay. I mean, what do you make of that?
I think that's a really lovely way to spend a day off because one of the beautiful things about putting up a piece of furniture with somebody you love is when you look at it and you think, oh, look at that wonky screw that I keep catching my dress on. Yeah. You know, and it kind of reminds you.
We did that together. Even though I got an infection when I cut myself with it. But, you know, that's part of it. Sweet, isn't it? OK, another dilemma now. This is from Carol in Kettering. She says, myself and my other half moved into our new place in November and we've been too busy to introduce ourselves to the neighbours. Now we see them around and it's getting a bit awkward. Have we left it too late for a good old-fashioned formal introduction? This is a very British problem, isn't it? You know, a lot of people do this. What do you think, Diane? Should you just...
Yeah, no, I am always in favour of just going for it. Yeah. I think it's a lot better to know somebody's name and just push through and go, look, I know it's so silly. We've been here since November. I'm sorry, but I just don't... Please tell me your name.
OK, well, that's one option. The other option is just ignore them for the rest of your life.
spoken like a true Englishman.
I think I would do that.
Yeah.
It's just so much less awkward. You know, and when you see them coming, just go the other way.
Yeah.
When they ring the bell, just hide behind the sofa. You know, that sort of
Yeah, and when you need help, just go, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm just trapped under the car. Let's not...
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, maybe just start a new life, living in a shed somewhere, so you don't need to ever see them.
I think that's absolutely right. I think neighbours are overrated. Just all you need is yourself. OK, on that misanthropic note, thank you very much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week, of course, when a comedian was cancelled for telling jokes, a peer was deplatformed at a university for promoting the value of discussion, and activists at a Let Women Speak event tried to stop women from speaking. Thank you so much to my panel, Diane Spencer and Leo Kearse, and to all of my guests this week. And if you want to join us here live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. It's a brilliant thing to do because we've got free wine and sausage rolls and all sorts of things. A couple of vegan options. Just turn up. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. And do remember that Headliners is on tonight with Leo Kearse hosting. So do join us for that as well. Thanks so much. Farewell.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Now looking ahead to next week, and it'll be quite a cold start tomorrow but becoming increasingly settled, and this is due to an area of high pressure that's going to make its way in from the northwest to become centred over the UK by the time we get to Monday morning, clearing away that low pressure we've seen over the weekend. But back to tonight, and we'll see some showers around northern and eastern coasts in particular through this evening, but cloud will start to quite readily break up, allowing for quite a harsh and widespread frost across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and we could see some icy stretches to start Monday down eastern coasts. Now looking further south, and there will be a patchy frost around and maybe the odd bit of mist and fog too, as well as the odd shower. But this will clear through Monday morning to leave a fine, dry for many and bright day with plenty of lengthy sunny intervals throughout the day. There'll be a bit more in the way of cloud in the south and west, but there will be some sunny spells too. And within these, it'll be feeling quite pleasant, even though temperatures won't be much higher than what we've seen today. As we go into Monday evening, and with those clear spells around, a frost will start to form down northern eastern coasts in particular. Now looking further west, we've got the next low pressure system making its way in from the Atlantic, bringing increased cloud cover and outbreaks of rain as well. So here temperatures will actually rise through the night, but as we get to Tuesday morning, we could still have a patchy frost further north and east. Through Tuesday morning, we will see that cloud and rain making its way northwards and eastwards, and this could bring some hill snow too, particularly over Scotland. We might just see a touch of snow over northern England too. And that really sets the theme for the rest of the week, with unsettled weather not going too far away, but milder temperatures too, especially from midweek.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 9 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, whisper it folks, Rishi Sunak and the Tories might just defy the odds and win the next general election. In the big story, MPs' second jobs are back in the news. Should they be paid more to discourage taking another career? And my Mark Meets guest is the esteemed Winston Churchill biographer, Andrew Liddle. What do we think about Churchill? Saint or sinner? We'll discuss that after 10. Big guests, big stories, and always big opinions. A lively 2 hours to come. But first, the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. A major incident has been declared in Dorset after the equivalent of 200 barrels of oil and saline solution spilt into Poole Harbour this morning. Poole Harbour commissioners say the leak came from a pipeline leading into the Witch Farm onshore processing facility. The pipeline has been shut down and the oil has been contained. Members of the public are being advised not to swim in the harbour or the surrounding area. Offenders who commit antisocial behaviour will be forced to clean up their communities as part of the Prime Minister's new immediate justice scheme. Under the plans to be announced tomorrow, local authorities will be given new powers to quickly and visibly punish criminals. Those who spray graffiti or commit other vandalism will have to fix the damage within 48 hours. Other penalties include picking up litter and washing police cars. Well, as part of the crackdown, the government has also announced a ban on the sale of laughing gas. Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove told broadcasters nitrous oxide canisters are helping to fuel antisocial behaviour and turning public